Before anything in your life changes, something in your mind must change. Destiny is not first shaped by circumstances, money, background, or connections. It is shaped by thoughts. Every great battle you will ever fight is not outside of you, it is within you. Your future is not waiting for a better economy, a better government, or better people. Your future is waiting for a better way of thinking. If you can win the battle in your mind, you can never lose in life. The mind is the birthplace of destiny. Every outcome you see in life was first conceived as a thought before it ever became an action, a habit, or a result. Nothing appears in your physical world without first passing through the invisible realm of the mind. Long before a person changes their location, status, or condition, they have already changed the way they think. The mind is the workshop where futures are designed, altered, delayed, or destroyed. Every idea, belief, and imagination planted in the mind eventually seeks expression. The mind does not remain neutral. It is always producing in the direction of what it consistently entertains. What you repeatedly think about begins to shape your perception, and perception governs decisions. Decisions, when repeated, become habits, and habits quietly construct the architecture of destiny. This is why two people can stand in the same environment and end up in completely different futures, because they are operating from different mental frameworks. Destiny does not respond to wishes, emotions, or intentions alone. It responds to clarity of thought. When the mind lacks vision, life becomes reactive rather than intentional. A confused mind produces a confused life, while a disciplined mind produces direction and order. The quality of your thinking determines the quality of your focus, and focus determines the accuracy of your movement through life. The mind also functions as a filter. It decides what you notice, what you ignore, what you fear, and what you pursue. If your mind is conditioned by limitation, you will overlook opportunities even when they are within reach. If your mind is governed by purpose, you will recognize possibilities where others see obstacles. What you allow to dominate your thinking eventually dominates your experience. Beliefs stored in the mind are powerful architects. They silently dictate what you believe is possible, acceptable, or attainable. Many people are not defeated by external forces, but by internal agreements they made without examination. When the mind accepts a belief, it begins to organize behavior around that belief, turning thoughts into a self-fulfilling path. The mind also serves as the control center for creativity. Innovation, progress, and advancement are products of mental expansion. When the mind is stretched by knowledge, vision, and understanding, it begins to generate solutions rather than excuses. A restricted mind reproduces limitation, while an enlightened mind reproduces growth. Your future is not a mystery waiting to be discovered. It is a reality waiting to be designed. The design process begins with intentional thinking. Whatever occupies your mind today is rehearsing your tomorrow. The thoughts you nurture become the instructions your life follows. Over time, the mind gives birth to patterns, and those patterns shape identity, direction, and outcome. The mind does not distinguish between what is real and what is consistently imagined. It responds to repetition and belief. This is why sustained negative thinking produces fear and stagnation, while sustained purposeful thinking produces confidence and momentum. The mind moves the body, and the body moves toward what the mind has already accepted as true. Every transformation in life begins with mental renovation. Before structures are built externally, foundations are laid internally. Change the contents of the mind, and the future begins to shift in response. Replace confusion with clarity, fear with understanding, and limitation with vision, and destiny begins to take form according to the new mental blueprint. Your thinking determines your level. Life never elevates a person beyond the capacity of their mindset. You do not rise by chance, luck, or association. You rise by the quality, depth, and discipline of your thoughts. The height of your life is already decided by the way you process information, interpret experiences, and respond to challenges. Before elevation appears in results, it first appears in perception. Every level in life demands a corresponding way of thinking. What worked at one stage will not sustain you at the next. When thinking remains the same, progress slows, even when opportunities increase. Many people encounter open doors but lack the mental readiness to walk through them. The limitation is not the door. It is the mindset required to function beyond it. Your thinking governs your expectations, and expectations shape your actions. If you expect little, you prepare little. If you think small, you act cautiously. If your thinking is narrow, your decisions will be restrained. Over time, these restrained decisions create a ceiling that feels external but is actually internal. The mind builds invisible boundaries long before life enforces visible ones. The level of responsibility you can carry is tied to the level of thinking you possess. Shallow thinking seeks comfort. Mature thinking seeks growth. Undeveloped thinking avoids challenge. Developed thinking understands that pressure refines capacity. As thinking evolves, so does tolerance for complexity, discipline, and delayed gratification. Higher levels demand higher mental stamina. Your thinking also determines how you interpret failure. At lower levels, failure is seen as defeat. At higher levels, failure is seen as data, feedback, and refinement. The difference is not intelligence, but perspective. Perspective is a product of thinking, and perspective determines whether an experience diminishes you or develops you. The environment may expose you to possibilities, but only thinking can position you to sustain them. Elevation without mental preparation leads to collapse. This is why growth that outpaces thinking becomes dangerous. When the mind is not upgraded, success becomes a burden rather than a blessing. Your conversations, habits, and choices all reveal your level of thinking. What you consistently talk about, worry about, and prioritize reflects where your mind operates. Over time, life aligns itself with that level. You cannot live at a higher altitude than your thoughts will allow. Advancement begins when thinking is challenged, stretched, and refined. When you outgrow old assumptions, new levels open naturally. Promotion in life is not first granted by external systems. It is earned internally through mental development. As thinking expands, capacity increases, and life responds by adjusting your level accordingly. Beliefs are more powerful than circumstances. Circumstances may describe where you are, but beliefs determine how you respond to where you are. Two people can face the same situation and produce entirely different outcomes, not because the circumstances changed, but because their beliefs did. Circumstances apply pressure, but beliefs supply direction. What you believe interprets reality long before you act within it. Beliefs operate as internal laws. Once accepted, they govern behavior automatically. A person does not rise or fall primarily because of events, but because of what they believe those events mean. When the mind assigns meaning to a circumstance, it begins to organize action around that meaning. If a situation is believed to be a limitation, the response will be retreat. If it is believed to be a challenge, the response will be engagement. Circumstances are temporary and external, but beliefs are internal and persistent. External conditions may change suddenly, but internal convictions shape long-term outcomes. Many people wait for circumstances to improve before they act, not realizing that action is often what changes circumstances. Beliefs either authorize movement or justify delay. What you believe determines what you expect, and expectations influence preparation. Low belief produces minimal effort. Strong belief produces intentional action. Even when circumstances are unfavorable, belief can generate creativity, resilience, and strategy. History repeatedly shows that progress often begins in environments that offered little advantage but encountered individuals with unshakable convictions. Beliefs also influence perception. They determine what you notice and what you dismiss. When belief is weak, opportunities appear invisible. When belief is strong, possibilities become obvious. The same environment can appear hostile or full of potential depending on the belief system interpreting it. Circumstances test belief, but belief shapes endurance. Pressure reveals what the mind has already accepted as true. When belief is anchored, adversity refines rather than destroys. When belief is unstable, even minor opposition feels overwhelming. Stability in belief creates stability in action. Many limitations attributed to circumstances are actually sustained by belief. Once a belief changes, behavior shifts, and circumstances begin to realign. External conditions often respond to internal conviction. What seems unchangeable externally often dissolves when the internal agreement with limitation is removed. Beliefs silently shape identity. Identity then shapes choices. Over time, those choices crystallize into outcomes that appear circumstantial but are actually belief-driven. When belief expands, identity expands, and life adjusts to accommodate the new internal framework. Circumstances may set the stage, but beliefs write the script. Ignorance is more dangerous than failure. Failure is an event, but ignorance is a condition. Failure happens once and can become a teacher. Ignorance remains and quietly sabotages progress. A person who fails may fall temporarily, but a person who remains ignorant stays permanently confined. Failure exposes what does not work, while ignorance prevents discovery of what could work. Failure often produces awareness, humility, and adjustment. Ignorance produces repetition of the same mistakes without understanding why. When someone fails, they gain information. When someone is ignorant, they lack information and often resist it. This resistance becomes a barrier greater than any external obstacle because it blocks growth at the source. Ignorance blinds perception. It limits what the mind can recognize, evaluate, or imagine. Opportunities can be present, but ignorance renders them invisible. Failure may close one path, but ignorance closes the mind to all paths. A failed attempt can be corrected, but an uninformed mindset cannot progress until knowledge is acquired. Failure encourages learning when the mind is open. Ignorance discourages learning by creating false confidence or fear of exposure. Many people avoid growth not because they are incapable, but because ignorance convinces them that improvement is unnecessary or impossible. This internal deception is what makes ignorance dangerous. It feels safe while slowly eroding potential. Ignorance also distorts decision-making. Decisions made without understanding often create consequences more severe than the original problem. Failure reveals gaps in skill or strategy, but ignorance hides those gaps until damage accumulates. Knowledge brings responsibility, but ignorance brings vulnerability. Failure can strengthen character when properly interpreted. It builds resilience, patience, and wisdom. Ignorance weakens character by keeping the mind unchallenged and undeveloped. A person who learns from failure becomes better equipped for future responsibility. A person who remains ignorant remains unprepared, regardless of experience. Progress demands awareness. Growth requires understanding. Ignorance delays destiny because it disconnects effort from effectiveness. A person may work hard, struggle long, and remain stuck simply because they do not know what they need to know. Failure refines direction, but ignorance prevents direction altogether. Ignorance is dangerous because it feels invisible. It does not announce itself as a problem. It disguises itself as tradition, comfort, or assumption. Until ignorance is confronted, it silently dictates limits. When knowledge enters the mind, clarity replaces confusion, and movement becomes intentional. Failure can be survived and corrected, But ignorance must be confronted and removed before advancement can occur. Your future responds to vision, not desperation. Life does not move because of panic, pressure, or emotional urgency. It moves in response to clarity, direction, and intentional focus. Desperation reacts to circumstances, but vision commands them. When a person operates in desperation, decisions are rushed, priorities are confused, and actions lack alignment. Vision, on the other hand, creates order, patience, and strategic movement. Desperation is driven by fear of loss or lack, while vision is driven by understanding of purpose. Fear narrows thinking and limits creativity. Vision expands perspective and invites innovation. When fear dominates the mind, choices are made to escape discomfort rather than to build a future. These choices may bring temporary relief, but they rarely produce lasting progress. Vision gives the mind a picture to move toward. Without that picture, effort becomes scattered. Energy is spent reacting instead of constructing. A person can be very busy and still be directionless. Vision organizes effort by assigning meaning to action. It tells you not only what to pursue, but also what to ignore. The future responds to preparation, not pressure. Desperation seeks immediate results without foundation. Vision accepts process and understands timing. It allows a person to delay gratification in order to achieve sustainability. When vision governs thinking, patience becomes strength rather than weakness. Desperation often leads to compromise. When the need feels urgent, values are sacrificed for speed. Vision preserves principles because it is anchored in long-term outcomes. It does not rush success at the cost of integrity. The future aligns with those who are consistent, not those who are frantic. Vision also stabilizes the mind during uncertainty. Circumstances may fluctuate, but vision remains constant. This stability allows for steady decision-making even under pressure. Desperation amplifies chaos, but vision brings calm and confidence. A future built on desperation is fragile because it is driven by emotion. A future built on vision is durable because it is driven by purpose. Vision attracts resources, people, and opportunities because it communicates direction. Desperation repels them because it signals confusion and fear. When vision becomes clear, action becomes intentional. The future recognizes clarity and responds accordingly. Progress thoughts shape habits, habits shape destiny. Every long-term outcome in life is the result of repeated behavior, and every repeated behavior begins as a thought. Thoughts are the seeds planted in the mind. Habits are the systems that grow from those seeds, and destiny is the harvest that eventually appears. Nothing becomes permanent in life without first becoming habitual. A single thought may seem insignificant, but repeated thoughts gain influence. What the mind entertains consistently begins to demand expression. Over time, these thoughts translate into choices, and choices repeated without resistance become habits. Habits operate quietly, often unconsciously, yet they exert tremendous control over direction and outcome. Habits remove the need for decision. Once a behavior becomes habitual, it no longer requires effort or motivation. It runs automatically. This is why habits are so powerful. They shape daily routines, responses, and priorities. A person does not live according to intentions, but according to habits. Good intentions cannot override bad habits, but strong habits can reshape weak intentions. Destiny is not shaped by occasional actions, but by consistent patterns. One disciplined habit practiced daily will eventually outweigh sporadic bursts of effort. Likewise, one destructive habit repeated over time can derail potential regardless of talent or opportunity. Habits accumulate results slowly but relentlessly. Thoughts determine the quality of habits formed. A mind filled with clarity produces disciplined habits. A mind filled with confusion produces inconsistent behavior. If thinking remains unexamined, habits will form by default rather than design. This is why awareness of thought patterns is essential to personal growth. Changing destiny does not begin with dramatic events. It begins with subtle shifts in thinking. When thinking changes, habits gradually realign. When habits realign, direction changes. Over time, this new direction produces a different outcome. The process is quiet, but the results are undeniable. Habits also shape identity. What you repeatedly do eventually becomes how you see yourself. Identity then reinforces behavior, creating a cycle that either advances or restricts progress. Thoughts initiate the cycle, habits sustain it, and destiny reflects it. If destiny is undesirable, habits must be examined. If habits are ineffective, thoughts must be challenged. Sustainable change follows this order. Control the thoughts, discipline the habits, and destiny will follow the structure that has been consistently built over time. Accelerates not because circumstances improve, but because direction is established. Vision gives the future something to respond to, something structured, something deliberate. Desperation cries for change, but vision commands it. Limitation is a learned behavior. No one is born believing they are incapable, unqualified, or restricted. These ideas are acquired over time through experiences, environments, repeated messages, and unchallenged assumptions. The mind learns limitation the same way it learns skill through exposure, repetition, and acceptance. What is learned can feel natural, even when it is not true. Limitation begins as interpretation. A single failure, criticism, or setback can be mentally labeled as identity rather than experience. When the mind accepts that label, it begins to adjust behavior accordingly. Effort decreases, expectations shrink, and caution replaces courage. Over time, this adjustment becomes normal, and the person forgets that another way of thinking ever existed. Learned limitation is reinforced by surroundings. Voices of doubt, fear, based advice, and negative examples teach the mind what not to attempt. When limitation is modeled consistently, it becomes believable. The mind absorbs boundaries without questioning their origin or validity. Eventually, these boundaries are defended as realism or humility, even though they restrict growth. Limitation also develops through repetition of restricted choices. When someone avoids risk repeatedly, avoidance becomes habit. When challenge is consistently rejected, comfort becomes priority. The mind then associates safety with stagnation and danger with progress. This association trains the person to remain within familiar limits even when opportunities appear. Fear plays a central role in learning limitation. Fear exaggerates consequences and minimizes potential. When fear dominates thinking, the mind seeks justification for staying small. Over time, fear-based thinking is reinforced by inaction, and inaction strengthens the belief that limitation is necessary. Limitation is sustained by unexamined beliefs. Statements repeated internally become internal rules. The mind obeys what it believes, regardless of truth. Once a belief about limitation is accepted, behavior aligns with it automatically. The person stops attempting what they believe is beyond reach, not because it is impossible, but because it feels forbidden. Because limitation is learned, it can be unlearned. Exposure to new ideas, environments, and perspectives challenges old mental boundaries. When the mind encounters evidence that contradicts limitation, discomfort arises. That discomfort is a signal of growth, not danger. Expansion begins when limitation is questioned, when the mind realizes that many restrictions were learned rather than inherent. Possibility re-enters thinking. As beliefs shift, behavior follows. The same mind that learned limitation can learn capacity, co-confidence, and competence when given new information and intentional direction. Purpose demands mental discipline. A meaningful assignment cannot be sustained by a careless mind. Purpose requires focus, order, and intentional control over thought patterns. Without discipline, the mind becomes distracted, inconsistent, and reactive, making it impossible to carry long-term responsibility. Purpose is not fulfilled by desire alone. It is fulfilled by a trained way of thinking. Mental discipline is the ability to govern attention. A purpose-driven life cannot afford scattered thoughts. When attention is constantly pulled in different directions, energy is diluted. Discipline trains the mind to prioritize what matters and to ignore what does not. This selectivity protects purpose from unnecessary interference. Purpose also requires endurance, and endurance is mental before it is physical. Challenges, delays, and opposition test the stability of thought. An undisciplined mind seeks escape when pressure increases. A disciplined mind interprets pressure as part of the process. It remains steady, adjusting strategy without abandoning direction. Mental discipline regulates emotion. Purpose is often compromised not by lack of ability, but by emotional inconsistency. When feelings dictate decisions, momentum is lost. Discipline allows action to be guided by principles rather than moods. This consistency builds trust in oneself and produces reliable progress. Discipline also governs internal dialogue. Purpose is weakened when negative or distracting thoughts are left unchecked. The mind must be trained to confront doubt, manage fear, and reject mental clutter. What is tolerated in thought eventually manifests in behavior. Discipline filters thoughts before they become habits. Purpose demands sacrifice, and sacrifice requires mental agreement before physical action. A disciplined mind understands delayed gratification. It can say no to comfort in order to say yes to calling. Without this internal agreement, purpose is constantly postponed for convenience. Growth in purpose requires learning, and learning demands humility and focus. Mental discipline keeps the mind teachable. It resists stagnation by continually seeking understanding and refinement. Purpose evolves as thinking matures, and discipline ensures that growth is intentional rather than accidental. When the mind is disciplined, purpose gains momentum, decisions align with direction, effort becomes consistent, distractions lose power. Mental discipline creates the structure that allows purpose to move from concept to reality through sustained, intentional action. Your destiny is not locked. It is waiting for you to think differently, waiting for you to challenge old beliefs, waiting for you to rise above mental limitations. When you change your mind, you change your choices. When you change your choices, you change your direction.